The hollow log had been Morning Star's sanctuary for 3 days, a refuge barely wide enough for her 16-year-old frame. She pressed herself deep into the rotting wood beside Willow Creek, listening to every sound: the whisper of wind through cottonwoods, the splash of water over stones, the distant call of hawks circling overhead. But no human voices, no boot steps, no gunfire like the terrible sounds that had shattered her world. The cavalry raid on her village played endlessly in her mind like a nightmare that wouldn't fade. She could still see the blue uniforms, still hear her grandmother's voice shouting for her to run, still smell the smoke from burning lodges. Morning Star had done what Apache warriors were taught. She'd found the smallest, darkest place she could and made herself invisible. Her stomach cramped with hunger, but caution kept her motionless. The creek water sustained her when thirst became unbearable, but she'd eaten nothing since fleeing the burning village. Her doeskin dress was torn from pushing through brush, and her moccasins were nearly worn through from running across rocky ground. Morning Star spoke fluent Apache and enough English to understand what the soldiers had been shouting during the attack. No survivors. Finish them all. Apache devils. The hatred in their voices had been almost as terrifying as their guns. At 16, she understood exactly what those words meant for her people. Martha Whitmore had been tracking her missing horses for 2 hours when she heard the soft sound from the fallen cottonwood. At first she thought it might be an injured animal, but as she approached the massive log, something made her pause. Martha was 43 years old, with graying brown hair pulled back in a practical bun, and hands calloused from 5 years of running a ranch alone since her husband's death. She'd never had children, a sorrow that had hollowed out her marriage and left her with only cattle and solitude after Tom's passing. But she recognized the signs of someone in hiding when she saw them. "Hello?" she called softly in English, then tried the few Apache words she'd learned from trading with peaceful bands. "Are you hurt?" The silence that followed was tense, alert. Martha knelt beside the log, her practical brown dress spreading around her in the dust. Through a gap in the rotting bark she caught a glimpse of dark eyes. Not the wide terror of a child, but the calculating wariness of someone old enough to understand danger. "I won't hurt you," Martha said gently, staying back from the opening. Years of working with spooked horses had taught her patience. "Are you hungry? Thirsty?" No response, but Martha could hear controlled breathing, someone fighting to stay perfectly still despite discomfort. She pulled a piece of jerky from her saddlebag and set it on the ground near the log, then backed away. "My name is Martha," she said, settling onto a nearby boulder. "I live at the ranch over that ridge. I have food there, clean water, a warm place to sleep." From inside the log came the faintest rustle, but the child didn't emerge. Martha wasn't surprised. Trust, especially for an Apache child who'd likely witnessed unspeakable violence, would take time. Martha waited as the sun moved across the sky, occasionally speaking in her calm, quiet voice about simple things: the weather, her horses, the way the light changed on the desert rocks. She didn't mention soldiers or raids or the tensions that had turned this territory into a battleground between Apache bands and white settlers. As afternoon faded toward evening, Martha heard movement, careful footsteps, the soft brush of fabric against bark. She didn't turn around, didn't make any sudden movements. From the corner of her eye, she saw a figure emerge from the log like a ghost materializing from shadow. The young woman was older than Martha had expected, perhaps 16, with the lean strength of someone who'd grown up in harsh country. Her long black hair was tangled with leaves and burrs, and her traditional Apache dress was torn and stained from days in the wilderness. But it was her eyes that made Martha's heart clench. Ancient wisdom in a young face, eyes that had seen too much and trusted too little. The jerky was gone, Martha noticed. The girl had eaten it while staying hidden. Smart survival instinct. "Hello," Martha said softly, still not looking directly at her. "I'm glad you came out. It's getting cold and this isn't a safe place to spend the night. Coyotes come down to the creek after dark." The young woman remained frozen, ready to bolt at the first sign of danger. Martha slowly reached into her saddlebag and pulled out a biscuit wrapped in cloth. "I made these this morning," she said, setting the food on the ground between them. "They're better than jerky, but not by much. I'm not much of a cook." Still no response, but the girl's gaze fixed on the biscuit with desperate hunger. Martha stood up carefully, moving like she would around a wild mustang. "I'm going to ride back to my ranch now. It's about a mile that way," she said, pointing toward the ridge. "There's a warm kitchen, more food than one person can eat, and a safe place to rest if you want it. You don't have to come, but you're welcome if you choose to." Martha mounted her horse and began riding slowly toward home, her heart aching for the terrified child she was leaving behind. But forcing the girl would only increase her trauma. Some healing required choosing safety rather than having it imposed. As Martha crested the ridge, she looked back once. The child was still standing by the log, small and alone against the vast landscape. But the biscuit was gone, and something in the girl's posture suggested she was watching Martha's direction rather than planning to flee deeper into the wilderness. That night, Martha left her kitchen window open and a lamp burning in case a frightened Apache child found the courage to approach. She set food on the porch, more biscuits, some jerky, a jar of water, and went to bed hoping that kindness might prove stronger than fear. She woke to find the food gone and small moccasin prints in the dust around her house. The child had come close enough to accept help, but not close enough to trust completely. It was a beginning. For 5 nights the pattern continued. Martha would leave food on the porch and wake to find it gone, along with fresh tracks circling her house like a cautious animal, learning the boundaries of safety. She began leaving other things, a blanket when the nights grew cold, a bar of soap beside a basin of clean water, a small hand mirror that disappeared after 2 days. Martha went about her daily ranch work with careful normalcy, speaking aloud to her horses and cattle as she always did, but now directing occasional comments toward the shadows where she sensed watchful eyes. "That mare's foal is growing strong," she'd say while mending fence, "born last spring during a thunderstorm." His mother was so scared, but she did fine once she trusted that the barn was safe. She never looked directly toward where she thought the child might be hiding, never made sudden movements or loud noises. Years of working with traumatized animals had taught her that healing happened on the victim's timeline, not the rescuer's. On the 6th morning, Martha found something new on her porch alongside the empty food dishes. A small weaving made from prairie grass, intricate and beautiful in the traditional Apache style. The child was offering a gift, a sign of gratitude and tentative connection. Martha examined the weaving with genuine admiration, then hung it carefully by her kitchen window, where the morning light would shine through it. That evening she left out better food, stew instead of cold biscuits, fresh bread, a piece of cake she'd baked specially. The breakthrough came on the 7th night, during a sudden thunderstorm that swept across the territory with violent intensity. Martha woke to lightning splitting the sky and rain hammering against her windows. Through the storm's chaos, she heard something that made her sit up in bed, a sound too human to be wind, too desperate to ignore. Martha grabbed a shawl and lantern, hurrying to her front door. On the porch, huddled against the rain and shaking with cold and fear, was the Apache child. Up close, Martha could see how young she really was, how thin she'd become during her days of hiding. The girl's dark eyes held the same wariness as before, but desperation had overcome caution. "Come inside," Martha said gently, stepping back to give the child room to choose. "It's warm, and the storm can't reach you here." The girl hesitated at the threshold, caught between need and learned fear. Martha set her lantern on the table and moved to the fireplace, giving the child space while making the room welcoming with light and warmth. "There are dry clothes if you want them," Martha said without turning around. "And hot soup on the stove. You don't have to talk or stay or do anything except get warm." Behind her, Martha heard the soft sound of bare feet on wooden floors. When she finally turned, the child was standing just inside the door, still poised to run but no longer outside in the storm. Water dripped from her long hair, and her torn dress clung to her small frame. Martha fetched towels and dry clothes, a simple cotton dress, and woolen stockings that would be too large but warm. She set them on a chair and pointed toward the bedroom. "You can change in there, I'll heat some soup." While the child was gone, Martha busied herself warming food and trying to contain her own emotions. This was the first Apache person to enter her home, the first child to trust her enough to seek shelter. The weight of that trust felt enormous. The girl emerged wearing the oversized dress, her wet hair combed back with her fingers. She moved like a deer ready to bolt, but she stayed when Martha ladled soup into a bowl and set it on the table with a gentle spoon. "What's your name?" Martha asked as the child ate with desperate hunger. "I've been calling you little one in my mind, but I'd like to know what your family called you." The girl looked up, studying Martha's face with intelligent eyes. When she spoke, her voice was barely a whisper. "Morning Star," Martha smiled. "That's a beautiful name. It suits you, brave and bright, finding your way in the darkness." Morning Star finished her soup in silence, but when Martha offered more, she nodded. As the storm raged outside, the child began to relax slightly, the warmth and safety of the house working their gentle magic. "Do you have family?" Martha asked carefully. "People who might be looking for you?" Morning Star's expression closed off, pain flickering across her young face. She shook her head slowly, and Martha understood that she was alone in the world, another casualty of the violence that had swept through Apache territory. "I'm alone too," Martha said quietly. "My husband died 5 years ago, and we never had children. This house gets very quiet sometimes." Something in her tone must have reached Morning Star, because the child looked at her with new interest, perhaps recognizing shared loneliness. "You could stay here if you wanted," Martha continued. "Not forever if you don't like it, but until you decide what you want to do. I could teach you English, show you how to cook, help you make new clothes. In return, maybe you could teach me some Apache words, show me how to make those beautiful weavings." Morning Star considered this offer seriously, weighing trust against survival, companionship against independence. Finally she spoke again, her English careful but clear. "The soldiers. They kill my grandmother, my mother, everyone." Martha felt tears prick her eyes at the simple, devastating statement. "I'm sorry. I'm so very sorry that happened to you." "You're not soldier," Morningstar observed, as if testing a theory. "No, I'm just a woman trying to take care of a ranch that's too big for one person. I could use help, and maybe you could use a safe place to heal." Morningstar nodded slowly. "I stay. Little while. Learn English words, then see." "Then see," Martha agreed. "That's all anyone can do. Take things one day at a time." As the storm gradually subsided, Martha made up a bed in her spare room, the room she'd once hoped would belong to a child of her own. Morning Star accepted the offer of shelter with the grave dignity of someone much older, understanding that this was a temporary arrangement built on mutual need rather than obligation. But as Martha watched the child settle into sleep for the first time in weeks without fear, she felt something stir in her chest that had been dormant since Tom's death. Not just compassion, but the fierce protectiveness that came with choosing to care for someone vulnerable. Morning Star had found shelter from the storm. Martha had found something she'd never expected, a chance to be the mother she'd always wanted to be, even if the path looked nothing like what she'd imagined. 3 weeks passed in a careful dance of adjustment and discovery. Morning Star helped with simple chores, gathering eggs, feeding chickens, carrying water, while Martha taught her more English words and showed her how white women lived. In return, Morning Star shared Apache knowledge, which plants could heal, how to read weather signs, how to move silently through brush. "Your people very wise," Martha said one afternoon as Morning Star showed her how to identify edible roots near the creek. "White people, we forget how to listen to the land." Morning Star nodded seriously. "Grandmother say Earth is teacher, but white eyes make too much noise to hear lessons." Their peaceful routine was shattered when Sheriff Tom Bradley rode up to the house with 3 other men Martha recognized as members of the town council. She stepped onto the porch to meet them, positioning herself between the riders and the house where Morning Star was learning to knead bread. "Afternoon, Mrs. Whitmore," Sheriff Bradley said, though his tone was anything but friendly. "We've had reports that you're harboring an Apache child. Folks in town are concerned." Martha kept her expression neutral. "Concerned about what, Sheriff?" "About safety, ma'am. These Apache raids have everyone on edge. Harboring one of them, even a young woman, sends the wrong message. Makes it look like we're sympathetic to their cause." From inside the house, Martha could hear the soft sounds of Morning Star moving around the kitchen. The girl had learned to recognize the voices of strangers and would be listening carefully, ready to flee if necessary. "What cause would that be?" Martha asked mildly. "The cause of a young woman seeking shelter after losing her family." Council member Henry Walsh leaned forward in his saddle. "Don't play naive, Martha. That girl's old enough to be a scout, learning our weaknesses so her people can plan another attack. 16-year-old Apache women are dangerous. They can fight, track, gather intelligence." Martha felt anger flare in her chest. She's a traumatized young woman who lost everything. The only thing she's learning here is how to feel safe again. "Apache girls grow up to be Apache warriors' wives," Sheriff Bradley said. "They birth the next generation of hostiles. Either way, she's not your problem to solve." "She's not a problem at all. She's a child who lost her family and needed help." The 4th man, a store owner named Peterson, spoke up. "The territorial authorities have a facility for displaced Apache children. They'll see she gets proper care, learns civilized ways." Martha had heard about those facilities, places where Apache children were stripped of their language, their traditions, their identity, all in the name of civilizing them. The thought of Morning Star in such a place made her sick. "She's receiving proper care here," Martha said firmly. "This discussion ain't really a request, Mrs. Whitmore," Sheriff Bradley replied. "The council has decided it's in the best interest of the community for you to turn the girl over to proper authorities." "And if I refuse?" Henry Walsh's expression hardened. "Then we might have to question whether you're fit to maintain property in this county. A lot of accidents can happen to a woman running a ranch alone, especially one who shows poor judgment about who she associates with." The threat was clear, and Martha felt a chill that had nothing to do with the desert wind. But she also felt something else, a fierce maternal protectiveness that surprised her with its intensity. "I see," Martha said quietly. "So the choice is between abandoning a child who trusts me or losing everything I've worked to build." "Glad you understand the situation," Sheriff Bradley said. "We'll be back tomorrow afternoon for the girl. Make sure she's ready to go." As the men rode away, Martha stood on her porch feeling the weight of an impossible decision. From inside the house came a small voice speaking careful English. "I bring trouble. I go tonight." Martha turned to find Morning Star standing in the doorway, her young face set with the same resigned acceptance Martha had seen the first day by the creek. The child had her few possessions bundled in a cloth, ready to disappear back into the wilderness. No, Martha said firmly, you're not bringing trouble. Those men are creating trouble because they're afraid of what they don't understand. I hear them talk. They take me to bad place or you lose ranch. I not let you lose home for me. Martha knelt in front of Morningstar, looking directly into her dark eyes. What if I told you this ranch means nothing to me compared to keeping you safe? What if I said I'd rather lose everything than send you away? Morningstar stared at her in confusion. Why? I'm not your daughter, not your blood. Maybe not, Martha said softly. But you're mine in every way that matters. You're the child I never had, the family I never expected to find. And family doesn't abandon each other when things get difficult. Tears welled in Morningstar's eyes, the first time Martha had seen her cry since that first night in the storm. My grandmother says same thing, family not always blood, sometimes heart choose family. Your grandmother was very wise. What do you think she would want you to do? Morningstar was quiet for a long moment, wrestling with the implications of Martha's offer. Finally she spoke with the grave seriousness of someone much older. If we family, then we decide together what you want to do. Martha felt her own tears starting to fall. This child who had lost everything was still brave enough to choose love over safety, connection over survival. I want to fight for us, Martha said. I want to prove that family isn't about what other people think is proper. It's about choosing to stand together no matter what comes. Morningstar nodded slowly, then set down her bundle and moved into Martha's arms. For the first time since they'd met, she allowed herself to be held, to accept comfort, to trust completely. We fight together, Morningstar whispered against Martha's shoulder. We family now. As night fell over the ranch, Martha and Morningstar began planning not just for the confrontation that would come tomorrow, but for the life they wanted to build together. It wouldn't be easy. The community's prejudice ran deep and the threats were real. But they had something stronger than fear now. They had each other, and sometimes that was enough to change the world. Martha spent the night planning, but not for surrender. She wrote letters to territorial officials, gathered documentation of her property ownership, and most importantly, prepared legal papers she'd been researching since the men's visit. When morning came, she rode into town with Morningstar beside her, not hiding, not ashamed, but ready to face whatever came next. Their first stop was the office of James Carson, the only lawyer in 3 counties and a man Martha hoped might value justice over popular opinion. Carson listened to her request with raised eyebrows but growing interest. You want to formally adopt an Apache child? He said slowly. Mrs. Whitmore, I have to tell you this is unprecedented. The territorial laws are complicated when it comes to Apache children. But not impossible? Martha pressed. Carson studied the papers Martha had brought, documentation of her property, character references from neighboring ranchers, proof of her ability to provide for a child. Difficult, but not impossible. If we can establish that the child was orphaned and in immediate danger, if we can prove you're providing better care than the territorial facilities, we can prove both those things, Martha said firmly. Carson looked at Morningstar, who sat quietly beside Martha, wearing a clean dress and with her hair neatly braided. Child, do you understand what adoption means? Mrs. Whitmore would become your legal mother, responsible for your care and education. Morningstar met his gaze steadily. I understand. Martha already my mother in heart. Paper just make white law agree. Carson smiled despite himself. Well, she certainly seems to understand the situation. Let me draw up the papers. But Mrs. Whitmore, you should know this will make you enemies. Some people will never accept an Apache child as your legitimate daughter. Some people, Martha replied, need to learn that love doesn't require their permission. By afternoon, Sheriff Bradley and his men arrived at Martha's ranch to find her waiting on the porch with Morningstar, Carson the lawyer, and a surprise guest. Major William Hayes from the Territorial Army Command. Martha had sent word through Carson's contacts requesting military witness to ensure proper legal procedure. Sheriff Bradley, Major Hayes said as the men dismounted, I understand there's some question about the custody of this Apache child. Bradley looked confused and slightly intimidated by the Major's presence. Just following community wishes, Major. Folks want the girl relocated to proper facilities. I see. And what facilities would those be? The Territorial School for Apache Children up near Phoenix. Major Hayes nodded gravely. Ah, yes, I'm familiar with that institution. Interesting approach to child welfare. Strip them of their language, forbid contact with their heritage, punish them for practicing their traditions. Very thorough. His tone made it clear what he thought of such methods. Carson stepped forward with his legal documents. Major Hayes, Sheriff Bradley, I have here properly filed adoption papers naming Mrs. Martha Whitmore as legal guardian and adoptive mother of the child, known as Morning Star. The papers have been reviewed and approved by Territorial Authority. Bradley sputtered in protest. You can't just adopt an Apache child like she's some stray animal. Actually, Carson replied calmly, territorial law allows for adoption of orphaned children regardless of heritage, provided the adoptive parent can demonstrate fitness and the child's consent. Both conditions have been met. Major Hayes examined the papers carefully. Everything appears to be in order. Mrs. Whitmore, you understand the responsibilities you're undertaking? I do, Major. I understand I'm promising to love, protect and educate Morning Star to the best of my ability. I understand I'm choosing to be her mother in every legal and moral sense. And you, young lady, the Major addressed Morning Star directly. Do you choose this adoption freely? Do you want Mrs. Whitmore to be your legal guardian? Morning Star stood up straight, speaking with the dignity of a young Apache woman who'd survived unspeakable loss. I choose Martha. She chose me first when I had nothing and no one. Now I choose her back. We make family together. Henry Walsh pushed forward angrily. This is ridiculous. You can't just let a white woman adopt grown Apache women. What's next? What's next? Major Hayes interrupted firmly, is that Mrs. Whitmore and Miss Morning Star will be treated with the respect due to any legal family in this territory. Anyone who interferes with their rights or threatens their safety will answer to Territorial Authority. As the men rode away, Carson gathered his papers with satisfaction. Well, Mrs. Whitmore, or should I say Mrs. Whitmore and Miss Morning Star Whitmore, you're now officially family in the eyes of the law. Martha looked at Morning Star, who was smiling with quiet joy at hearing her new legal name. How does it feel to be Morning Star Whitmore? Feel like I belong somewhere again, Morning Star said softly. Like I have family who fight for me, and I have family to fight for too. You'll always have that, Martha promised, no matter what anyone else thinks or says. That evening, as they sat together on the porch watching the sunset paint the desert in shades of gold and crimson, Morning Star asked the question that had been weighing on her mind. Martha, what if other Apache people think I betrayed my heritage by joining white family? Martha considered the question seriously. Do you feel like you've betrayed your heritage? No. I still remember grandmother's stories, still speak Apache, still know the old ways. I just also learning new ways now. Then that's your answer. You're not betraying anything. You're surviving, growing, becoming who you're meant to be. Your Apache heritage is part of you forever, and now being my daughter is part of you too. Morning Star nodded, understanding. Like tree that grows strong roots in two kinds of earth. Still same tree, but stronger because it has more to draw from. Exactly like that. As the stars emerged in the vast desert sky, Martha and Morning Star Whitmore sat together in comfortable silence. Two women who'd found family in the most unexpected way. The Apache girl who'd hidden in a hollow log had found not just shelter, but a mother who would fight the world to keep her safe. The widow who'd never had daughters had found not just a young woman to care for, but the family she'd always dreamed of. In the distance, a coyote called to its pack, and Morning Star called back in perfect mimicry, making Martha laugh with delight. They were home, not just in a place, but in each other's hearts. And that was the only belonging that truly mattered.